Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
Welcome. Communication breakdown, overcoming challenges in high conflict relationships. Everybody gets stuck in repeating patterns of ugly disagreement. Frustrations run high and solutions seem impossible. Communication can so easily break down for so many reasons. The intensity of the unhappiness that never gets solved leads to a familiar stickiness that neither feels able to dig out of. And that is just so hard for everybody. High conflict relationships are characterized by frequent arguments, emotional volatility, and an inability to reach resolutions. These relationships may be fueled by deep-seated issues, differing values, unresolved conflicts that escalate over time. I believe that values collisions are rocket fuel for all ugly fighting. Both partners are struggling to express themselves effectively or listen empathically. Trust erodes and the emotional atmosphere becomes charged with negativity, creating a cycle of escalating tensions. In high conflict relationships, each partner may feel misunderstood, unappreciated, unfulfilled, further exacerbating the friction and contributing to a toxic dynamic. The polarization of perspectives that we are all experiencing culturally, not just in our relationships, often leads to a lack of compromise or shared understanding. This ongoing clash of viewpoints can strain the emotional well-being of individuals involved, leading to feelings of isolation and frustration and loneliness, even in a relationship. High conflict relationships may also impact mental health, contribute to stress, anxiety, and depression for those caught in a cycle of constant discord. Fights rarely show up out of nowhere, so when they finally arrive, it's easy to start listing every single harbored resentment that ends up being such a long list that the listener gets paralyzed and floods, unable to respond. This happens because we humans avoid and deflect dealing with things so often that they pile up and get very difficult to manage. Since 1979, Rashke and Rashke studies have shown that children in families with high marital conflict are more likely to have high levels of emotional distress. Certainly, it is stressful for both partners to repeat these unsatisfying patterns over and over and over again. Escalation is often something both partners contribute to. De-escalation, on the other hand, is a step into awkwardness and the unfamiliar. Change, of course, is really hard. That's how we stay in business. Maybe just wanting the fighting to be less ugly is not enough for both partners. Today's guests are going to help us improve our understanding of how to get out of ugly, repetitive conflict. Janine Estes Powell, LMFT, is founder of Estes Therapy, a group practice in San Diego, California, that concentrates on relationship counseling. As a licensed marriage and family therapist, she is certified in EFT, which is very, very research-based, and she has been helping countless couples repair their relationships. And we have two for the price of one. Jacqueline Wheelick, LMFT, is a licensed marriage and family therapist, in case you were wondering what the initials meant, and owner of her own private practice, Therapy by Jackie. Jackie previously worked at the Gottman Institute, and you've heard me mention John Gottman many times on this podcast, one of the world's leading research institutes for couples and relationships. Relationships, where she was exposed to their revolutionary research on love and relationships. Together, they have written a book just published in January, Help for High Conflict Couples Using Emotionally Focused Therapy, EFT, and the Science of Attachment to Build Lasting Connection. So glad you guys could be with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I want to begin by getting us all on the same page, by you both defining what a high conflict couple is. I loved in your book that you differentiated them from normal couples because the volume is turned up.
Yeah. So like you said, the volume is turned up high when we have high conflict couples. And that means a fight can come out from nowhere it goes from 0 to 60 within seconds. So we are talking about the dishes to all of a sudden yelling, screaming, breaking things, slamming doors, threatening divorce, or ice cold shutdowns, right? It's just a lot more intense, a lot quicker. We're just like all other couples. It's just like the volume is turned up on high.
Did you want to add anything, Jackie?
Yes, beautifully said. Yeah, it's just really interesting. I mean, our book is for high conflict couples, but I have gotten lots of feedback that people in relationships that they would not maybe describe as high conflict are getting benefit from it just because the way EFT works so beautifully is you can use the steps and stages so similarly with, a not high conflict couple as is with a high conflict because they're so similar. It's just you take that, stereo knob, volume knob, and you just crank it way, 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 way up. So it's really similar behaviors, maybe like shutting down or being critical or defensive, but they're just exaggerated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What are the 3 main reasons why a couple becomes a high conflict couple?
So we've talked a lot about this in the book around we have a lot of around trauma, having unprocessed trauma, attachment injuries, such as an affair or someone not being there for them, right, in times of need, and then ongoing unmet needs. Those are kind of the 3 areas that we address, but there's also another 3 that cause severe high conflict couples, which is having abuse, having active addictions, or having active affairs. Those are the 3 A's. So it's kind of like we have 3 S for sure areas where if we have any type of abuse, addiction, affair, we will have volatility. But usually if we have those kind of removed, because we don't recommend that with the couples to read the book if they have this unsafety with any type of trauma, it's ultimately around these unmet needs, ongoing repetitive nature, and that trauma that's not processed through, and these attachment injuries that aren't repaired.
Mm-hmm. So in the first chapter of our book, we kind of help readers, we talk about the 3 A's, and we're like, hey, if you have active affair, active addiction, or there's active abuse in your relationship, right? We kind of give a bit of advice on how to press pause or stop or get help or treatment for those things. And once those things are paused, right, you don't need to be fully healed from your addiction for 10 years before you can read a book. That's not at all. But we just need to be in a place where you can absorb this information and it's safe for the partner. Once those things are paused, then emotionally focused therapy is the best next step, because there's going to be so much disconnection in the relationship that has happened and comes from those 3 A's. Then on top of that, like Janine's saying, we have most often what happens is couples come in, they're high conflict. They have no idea why they're high conflict. They're like, my partner just looks at me in a certain way and I feel just this lightning bolt go through my body and I get so escalated, and you just immediately want to jump in and start screaming and explaining yourself, right? And they're like, I don't know why. And we do these just through exploring their history. It's usually something in their past. Maybe there's been some sort of trauma before the relationship or in the relationship with these unmet attachment needs or betrayals, right? Affairs are only one tiny section of betrayals that can happen in a relationship, right? That has caused their nervous system to be in fight or flight and be so dysregulated, right? That it's hard for them to stay regulated and grounded enough to keep that volume turned down in their cycle with their partners.
I remember a couple where trying to figure out what the trauma was, and then it emerged eventually that it was about a miscarriage that hadn't been attended to by the husband.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that seems like a big thing. That
Absolutely.
And men are rather clueless because they don't know what to do. But it's something that gets harbored and resentful. Yeah.
Right. Well, and what you're describing with the miscarriage, that's a common area of an attachment need that there's an injury because it feels like, hey, it's been safe. I can count on you throughout these years. I can count on you. And then all of a sudden rupture because here's a significant event. I needed you. I couldn't count on you. I had to get through the distress on my own. And what I learned is it's not safe for me to count on you. So I'm going to zip myself up, take care of myself. And it's actually a really common assessment for us as clinicians is to ask, has there ever been a time when you needed your partner and couldn't count on them? Or was there a time that ruptured that connection? It goes from safe to all of a sudden it's broken and it's no longer safe. I can't count on you.
Yeah, and that rupture, that's a really good word. In your book, you make the observation that a common theme we notice in high conflict couples is that each partner doesn't seem to know how much they impact the other partner. That's a quote. And the ability to stay regulated emotionally is missing. Could you share more about this with my audience?
I love this quote. I know exactly the point of the book that you're referring to with that. And it warms my whole heart because it is so common that people get the message, this underlying current in their interactions with their partner that they don't care about me. That's the message that they're receiving. But it's actually usually quite the opposite. The partner cares so deeply that they're responding in this way that's quite ineffective. It's missing the mark. That's why they're turning the volume up because they care so deeply and the other partner matters so much to them, right? So like, here's a great example because things can get really vague. So we like to make it like concrete of like, we have this couple who comes in, we have one partner who feels like they don't care about me at all because anytime I try to tell them how I feel, they leave. They get in the car, they slam the car door, they start to drive away, and then they run in the street and start chasing the car and want to pound on the windows like, why aren't you listening to me, right? The message that it sends when that person's driving away, the other partner's receiving a message, you don't care about me. But really, in fact, when we dive into the deep emotional world and needs of this person is actually they're so distressed and so overwhelmed by feeling like they're not good enough, right? And the conflict is so intolerable. They want to do anything they can to create peace, to get the conflict to stop, even if that means like leaving, right? And so once we start to reframe the interactions of the cycle for clients to start to see that the behaviors of the other person, they actually mean like so much to them, we're just communicating ineffectively, it changes the whole game. It creates a lot of empathy. Mm-hmm.
And what Jackie's describing is at times their distress level is so intense that they can't track their impact and how they're hurting the other person. They can't track the other person's feelings. It's kind of like my feelings are the most intense and that's all I can see. I think of a screen door as I can't see past all my pain to see you. And sometimes they do, and they don't care how it's going to affect the other person because my pain is too intense.
Yes, I absolutely think that's true. When partners don't feel safe and trust is missing, how can they begin to move forward instead of repeating the same stuck cycle?
Well, that's a good question, because when we don't have the safety and trust, that is the bottom line that you have to start from, is how do we create that safety, right? We need safety first. So we like to talk about understanding like that intense feeling in your body and being able to like identify like, oh, I'm wanting to zip up, or I'm wanting to throw out bombs to protect myself, and really recognizing like, I don't feel safe right now. How do we put words to that? Right? And pressing pause and not going into this, like the throwing of the bombs or zipping up and withdrawing. And so it's really finding a pause button and identifying like, right now it feels really scary for me. And right, I'm wanting to protect myself, and just really focusing on your body, because a lot of times when we're in conflicts, everybody wants to talk about how their partner did them wrong. Right? The offense, defense, right? I'm the victim and you're the villain. And that is not going to get us anywhere, because it's just going to keep us in that pattern. And so we have to really press that pause button, put the spotlight on your body, and identify like, right now I'm starting to get worried. I'm wanting to protect myself, and trying to kind of calm the body down, the nervous system, because the body can be so dysregulated. So your number one job is find that pause button, regulate your body, and talk about what's going on for your side versus going into, I'm the victim and here's how you did me wrong.
I talk about the comfort of blame. There's a lot of comfort in blame.
I love that.
It can feel so good to blame, right? It can feel great. And let me tell you, every move you did wrong, but it's not going to get us out of the conflict. And it's just going to keep us wrapped up in it. And then, you know, those hours, like hours and hours at night when it's, here's what I did, and here's what you did, and let me explain where you did, and let's how, you know, and it's ongoing, and hours and hours and hours. So we really have to step out of that blame, even though we want to. I mean, I know I want to get into it sometimes with my wife.
100%. It feels good to be like, see, I am just perfect, and I've never... We joke about that in the book too. We're like, we've made these mistakes also, you know?
Yes, I always say I don't do therapist as goddess. It's not who I am. I'm just a regular person.
Yep, same.
How does attachment theory help us understand more about ourselves? Because that's really interesting.
Oh, I love talking about attachment theory because it helps us understand kind of the pattern or the cycle of interactions we can get in with our partners, our clients can get in, right? In the book, we talk about kind of the 4 big ones, which is anxious, avoidant, disorganized, and secure, right? So kind of simply put, in that like little example we were using earlier, the anxious attachment person is going to look like the person running to chase their partner, maybe backing away or getting in the car to leave. They're going to be yelling or criticizing or raising their voice or nitpicking or lots of explaining. But really underneath that, they're trying really hard to feel seen and heard. An avoidant attachment person is going to do a lot of book answers or pacifying answers. They want the conflict to stop. They might be the type of person to like say anything just to get you to be okay or get off their back. Or they're going to be the person who's like, I'm sleeping in the other room. I'm getting a hotel tonight. I'm getting in the car. And really underneath, usually a lot of times these people feel so overwhelmed and fearful of the conflict that they're never going to be good enough, that they can't get it right for their partner. And a disorganized attachment style is going to be kind of like a combo of both. It can feel really chaotic, kind of like I want you close and then pushing you away, this back and forth. And a secure attachment is what we are going for when we're using emotionally focused therapy. And really the point of the book and all the exercises in the book are to guide people and their relationships towards creating a secure attachment. But really, I think, you know, the attachment styles are an interesting way of just understanding, oh, hey, here's how I show up in my relationships. You know, I think knowledge is power. I think it's empowering and cool to know, but I don't like people to get hung up on them because they're fluid and they can change. You can change them at any time in your life. So some people, I think, get kind of freaked out. They're like, oh no, I tested anxious attachment. We have a test in our book. But it's like, no, it's empowering because you can change it, right?
Yeah, I think that when you identify and understand, then you can do something about it. And if you're just swimming around in a twilight zone of confusion, you really can't nail it down and say, okay, well, what am I going to do about this? So,
Well, and
yeah.
we take attachment theory. It's about having a sense. The phrase of it takes a village to raise a child, right? It's like we are a community pack animal, right? We're about community, closeness, connection. It's all about getting this sense of security. And a healthy type of dependency is, can I count on you? Are you there for me, right? And so we want that secure connection of feeling solid. Like if I need you, you'll show up. If I go through something distressing, I can count on you there. And without those, like Jackie's talking about, there's all of these insecure attachment styles that show up in conflict. And once we understand what's going on underneath, right, deeper levels around just wanting that security and how it comes out in this like kind of attacked, withdrawal, chaotic type of ways, then you actually have a roadmap on, okay, now how do we kind of spearhead it and take care of it?
Yeah.
Really, at the end of the day, like as humans, right, we all just want to feel that we matter, that we're important, that our partner hears us and loves us and sees us and accepts us. And all of our behaviors in conflict, I think, are kind of just like a exaggerated, maybe like a less helpful way of getting to that.
That makes a lot of sense. On this podcast, there has been a lot of acknowledgement that vulnerability is crucial to building a relationship. Would you share your 3-color traffic light for safety? I thought that was kind of cool.
Okay, it's so funny. This is just how my brain works, is having different ways of breaking down relationships. And so we like to have a sense of safety with for instance, friends, is with somebody who's green. Green is, I can count on you. You're there for me. I can go vulnerable. I can show you all my messy parts, ugly parts, anything, and it just feels safe. And I can have these raw, vulnerable conversations. Then we have those yellow people in our life. And these might be like the people who you can share certain parts of your life that are vulnerable, but other parts you quite can't. They might be a little gossipy, right? They might, you might have some people who might judge you a little bit further or get a little critical, but at the end of the day, if I need you, they'll show up for you. And your friends will show up, they'll be there, or your family, they'll be there, but they might have some areas of, they might judge you a little bit or might get a little bit critical. Those are our yellow people. And then the reds are the danger, don't open up. It is not safe to open up. You can't count on them to change. And if you do, you will get hurt. We need to know who those red people are in our life, to stay away or to walk delicately with. We can't change red people at times. A lot of times people get into this like, I'm going to force these red people into being a yellow person in my life. But the red peoples are reds. They can't be safe. And so opening up your heart and going vulnerable to somebody who's not going to handle with care and not be delicate, you need to know about that. Because yes, we want people to go vulnerable and to show kind of that rawness and draw closeness. But there are some people it is not safe and it will be used against you. So we like to have a red, yellow, green, so you can start to look at what type of people in my life are reds, yellows, and greens. How am I showing up? Am I a red, yellow, or green? Sometimes I might be a little bit more gossipy. Okay, well, I'm a yellow. How can I improve that? Right? And really looking at who's in our life and how are we showing up around it.
Yeah. And I think it's cool to kind of think about, like in the book, we don't want at first a really high conflict couple to just immediately go vulnerable with each other, right? Because that's not they don't have the skills and tools, like Janine is saying, to handle with care. I love that, right? It's this fragile box. Like, we need it to be wrapped with bubble wrap and all this stuff, because our vulnerability is precious. So,
and it will be used against you when it's high conflict.
It's going to be thrown back at you, right? Right when you least need that to come back in your face. And so we kind of like go through like a series of steps to create a safe place where then at a certain point in the book, it is safe to be able to go vulnerable with the partner if they've been doing the book with each other. And like because they have the skills and tools to know, this is the vulnerability. I know what to do with this. I can handle with care. But it takes some skills to lead up to that, right? We can't treat everybody like a green person if we know someone's yellow or red,
Yeah, it's about being choiceful. So emotionally focused therapy, or EFT techniques, help couples understand what lies at the root of their emotional experiences, learn how to initiate communication in a more effective, vulnerable way, and ask for what they need clearly. It draws couples closer. So tell my audience about ARE, the 3 elements to build a strong foundation.
Yes, ARE is, thank you to Sue Johnson, founder of Emotionally Focused Therapy. ARE, accessibility, responsive, and engaged. What that means is is showing up for somebody, being available, being accessible. Can I access you when I need you? Will you be there? Will you respond to me, emotionally respond to me, and let me know that my emotions matter? And will you stay engaged and really it's like feeling as if somebody's got your back no matter what. And your job is to show up and be available, accessible, emotionally responsive, engaged, right? We need to be available in that safe way. And I think of it, we use in the book, the example of a trapeze and a flying trapeze. And you're going from one bar, flying through the air, letting go, going to the catcher who's swinging through the air on the other. And what we want is somebody to jump out and go vulnerable and take a risk and experience the other person to catch them and to show up for them and to meet the need. And so the ARE is really important. And we use that a lot within our work of just how can you kind of teach that person that you are there for them. ARE, are you accessible? Are you emotionally responsive and engaged, right? How are you going to show that you're showing up so they don't take a risk and then they splat on their face, right? They fall on their face. We want them to know that you're going to catch them.
I really like that. I like the trapeze. Please share your ideas about the role of emotions in conflict. There was a meme that I just made, and it says communication requires emotional balance. And I was thinking about the role of emotions in conflict when emotions are out of balance. So what's your advice about that?
Oh, well, one of the things I love about emotionally focused therapy is they differentiate between secondary emotions and primary emotions, right? So secondary emotions, if we think of like a flower, those are the ones that, maybe a rose that's spiky, okay? Those are the ones that like our partner is going to see and experience. Usually we're going to put those out first because they're a little bit less vulnerable, right? Like frustration, annoyance, anger, resentment, jealousy, all of these things. But really what we're trying to do in the point of healthy conflict is to get to the root. And the roots, what's actually going on underneath those secondary emotions, are what we'd call primary emotions. And those are the really vulnerable ones. Those are the ones that make you really go, okay, is this like a green light person? Because I'm about to share this. I'm going to jump off that trapeze and I really need to make sure that person's going to catch me. An example of those is like fear of losing your partner, fear that you're not good enough for them, loneliness, sadness, feeling sad about being disconnected, wanting to feel close, right? All these really soft, juicy ones, but they're really a lot more vulnerable. And so what we try and do is help our clients understand. Usually it's much easier for them to get to the secondary emotion first, and then we help them unpack what's the primary emotion underneath that, what attachment need or attachment insecurity is there, and then those are the ones that we want to communicate to our partners, because that's going to be a lot safer for them to catch us if we're at the trapeze on right there and we're about to jump off. We should say something more vulnerable is going to make it easier for them to catch us than if we throw out a secondary emotion, right? Yes.
One of the things that I have on my website for people is a feeling word vocabulary list. And
I love that.
I developed it back in 1980 when I was working with incest victims. And I had 3x5 index cards with different feeling words. And I had a stack of them. I had the stack for probably 30 years, and then somebody didn't give it back. But because I used to lend it out to people. And so I felt like all those people had given some kind of energy into those cards. And so then I would have people pick 4 or 5 cards out of the pile about how they were feeling, because there is often a lack of connecting with the right words. And I really, maybe because I'm a big reader, I really think precision with vocabulary and understanding there's differences. And so anyway, it's there, 2 pages, anybody can print it out, so it's on the emotions page. What are some techniques couples can use to lower the temperature on their interactions to press pause? How do we regulate ourselves during hypoarousal? And I took that word from your book because I thought about that's what happens. We get kind of raw and stuck, and we just dig in and make it worse. So what can we do about that?
Well, regulation is such an important part of being able to have these new interactions that we're working on with emotionally focused therapy. It's so important that we have an entire chapter called Cooling Down that's dedicated to this. There's so many, we could list off a million little tiny tips and tricks and things that people can do at home, and there's stuff you can do individually. But what I just kind of want to share right now is, because we're talking about love, we're talking about couples, is the concept of co-regulation, which is so beautiful that, because like Janine was saying, we are pack animals. It's hardwired in our brain to have safe, close connections with other people. So the goal being, at some point in this relationship as a high conflict couple, that the relationship becomes safe enough where when you're in hyperarousal, you can regulate together. You can press pause on the negative cycle that you might be stuck in with them. We can say, hey, we're noticing the cycles here. We'd like to do something different. If the couple feels safe, they can hold hands. They can take deep breaths together while holding hands. You can hug each other. You can do deep breathing together. But anytime I'm with couples in a session, the more I can get them to practice co-regulating, regulating their body, themselves, and with their partner is so, so important. But really, the most important thing you have to do before you can do that is to notice that the interaction is going sideways and safely press pause in a way that is not blaming. So you cannot say, you're doing the cycle, you need to stop. We can use language as we're in the cycle. We're getting spun up. The cycle's taking advantage of us, right? I like to externalize the cycle because it's separate from you, right? Pressing pause and then doing what you need to do to calm down. Maybe that's taking a quick 30-minute break and making sure you're coming back to the relationship. Maybe you're taking deep breaths.
There's a trick that is common with children. It's called just add water. And when children are not okay, just add water by letting them play in water, drink water, put them in the bath, do any type of activity with water, and it helps their body regulate. And at times, I like to do that with my clients as well. My couples of, okay, you are so angry and so upset, you've got to go take a cold shower and shock your system, or you've got to go drink some water and it helps regulate when you're swallowing. Or go swim, go watch, listen to the listen to the waves crashing at the beach. We're in San Diego. Or anything with water can help regulate the system at times. But there's just a lot of different strategies we put in the book. And I think the biggest thing is we want to spin out of control and go, oh my gosh, this is going to be the end. Or how can we be in this relationship? And it gets really big. And we just have to know, like, right now we're in a fight. We're in our negative cycle. The cycle is the problem. Really just identifying it as the problem. And that's what Jackie was saying, is like, this is the problem here and we need to stop it. I like to always say, I love you, you love me. We're going to figure this out. Right? Because that's the reality. I love you, you love me. We need to figure this out, because that's going to focus on the attachment of at least saying, like, we're going to. We don't know it yet. We don't have that roadmap, but we're going to have to figure it out.
And we might not figure it out in the next 45 minutes. It might, my therapist would say often, you may need 25 to 75 conversations. And I love that idea of, you know, we always act, because we're such a frantic society, that we're going to get this solved in 3 conversations. And the idea that there could be 25 conversations, because she said, it's the only way to soften the hard edges of differences. And so you need those conversations. And the more Gestalt, the more practice you get. San Diego's got some Gestalt energy there. I actually got to train with Laura Pearls, and Sonia Nevis is who I'm referring to right now. But softening, like Play-Doh, I'd say, you know, when you're in an argument, it's that hard. You know how Play-Doh would get stuck and hard, and you have to roll it around in your hands to warm it up. And that's what 25 conversations could do. And so just thinking, well, if you have 10 conversations, that's probably normal, as opposed to this imagination we have, or fantasy we have, that it should be 3 conversations. Or better yet, you should just know without me asking, because you love me.
All right.
We talk about that
exactly.
Too. Yeah.
Just read my mind. You know, and Rhoda, what you're talking about as well is these couples need to have corrective experiences over and over and over and over and over, right? And just because we had one successful talk doesn't mean I know that I can count on you and you'll show up, and vice versa, right? And so they do need to have that over and over. A lot of times when I'm with couples, I say, give me 1 month to every year you've been together. Right? Because we've got some history. So let's not expect it to just all of a sudden we had one conversation, we're done, and now everything's beautiful. And that's what a lot of times clients want, right? Is I had the conversation. We should be good.
I have, when I'm working with one half of a couple, I will say, go home and tell your partner that you need to practice, you know, and they really grab on this idea of, I do need to practice, don't I? Yeah, you didn't ride a bike the first time with magic. You have to practice what you've learned, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And it's not going to come out pretty for the first, 5, 10, 15 times.
Not at all.
Any help you can give us on being more self-aware of our negative repeat patterns, which we all do?
So the negative repeat patterns that you're talking about is very much a thing that all couples can typically tell you exactly who's going to do what, right? Who does what move? Oh, I get defensive. Oh, I blame. Oh, I yell. Oh, I question. And so that pattern is such a critical one to learn how to stop, right? And the first move is really becoming the expert at the pattern, because you can't stop something if you don't understand all parts of it. So you have to really do a deep dive into what that cycle is and who does what and what underlying emotions are there, what attachment needs are underneath it. And the more that they become the experts at it, which we have some exercises to, then we can stop it, call it out. And it only takes one person to stop a cycle. So if you think of a baby mobile, you pull on one side, the whole thing moves. So if you know that you get really defensive and you want to go into explain mode to here's why I am not the bad guy, right? The number one thing is to then step out of that reaction, fight that urge to do that defend mode and take it, press that pause button. I love pause buttons. They are so important for me. Do a deep breath, kind of bite your tongue, count to 10, do whatever you can to say, I hear you. What you say matters. I want to hear it, and I'm fighting through my old reactions. Give me a second, right? And so we need to actually say what we're trying to do to get out of it. And when we're first starting, it's going to throw our partners off. They won't know how to trust it right away either, right? If you're not defensive, then they're like, wait, what are you doing? And so they might kind of jump again, not expecting it. So
Totally. And like you're saying, it doesn't have to be pretty, and it's not going to be at first. Like I always tell my clients, like, you don't have to do emotional gymnastics, right? This doesn't have to be therapist-y. You don't have to sound like me, right? It can be, I think the most beautiful ways of doing it are vulnerable and clunky, but the essence of it is just noticing when you're in the cycle, calling it out, pressing pause in a really vulnerable, non-blaming way. And then like Janine's saying, make explicit what you're doing. Like, I'm going to take a deep breath. I want to regulate my body because I love you and I want us to have this conversation. I'm feeling really triggered. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And something Jackie just reminded me of is we want them to go vulnerable. And we want the partners to know, I'm going to do something different because you matter, and really taking that risk and saying, I'm really scared. So that trapeze analogy, you're 23 feet up on the air, you're leaning over the edge and you're scared and you're about to jump. And we need to let our partner know, I'm scared right now, but I'm going to jump because you matter, and I'm going to try to do something different. And then you got to jump. But we got to do it in the beginning, because if the house is on fire and you're already during a fight, it's really hard then to pull out vulnerability and get your partner to show up for you. It's kind of like the house is now on fire and it's really hard to do it there. So it's that initial moment at the beginning of a conversation is going to be the most critical part of catching it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Isn't the trapeze metaphor just the best? Like, it works so well on both sides. Because I think, and maybe this is just me, but I feel like a lot of attention gets put on the partner who's going vulnerable. And like, which is great. We need vulnerability. But it's equally as important to talk about that person in the trapeze who's swinging and gonna catch that person. And it's like, how do we set them up for success? How do we set our partners up for success so that they can catch us and have this new experience of us too? It's 50-50. And I think that metaphor does such a great job of highlighting the importance of both and setting both up for success. It really even just reminds me as a therapist and a person, like, what it's like to be on the other side also.
It's why I like the challenge of couples work, because there's more truth in the room, and and you really can see how it works together, that it's about both people. It really is,
Oh, I love sitting back and watching it play out for a second. Like, let me watch how you two react so quick, and it's fast. It's fast.
Yeah.
And that's just all relationships, whether we're high conflict or not. Like, conflict is conflict, and we're emotionally charged.
We're all going to have it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
What are our relationship insecurities?
Oh, yeah. So those are really like those underlying vulnerable feelings or needs that are underneath some of those emotions that we were talking about earlier.
You've mentioned a couple of them. Yes, I'm not good enough.
Yes, and so it's so cool in the book, we list out the most common relationship insecurities and then what to do about them.
That's like the fear of abandonment, fear of not being good enough, right? Jackie was about, you're saying, is there's so many of these like raw, vulnerable, like feeling insecure on where that place is in the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what they might need from their partner or themselves to feel a little bit more secure. It's not always the partner's responsibility to take care of that, but they can support and give reassurance. But we talk about, for example, like the person who's fearful of abandonment making like a love box and putting in there like memories and mementos of like, to remind themselves when they get triggered and that I'm so scared I'm going to be abandoned place, they can take that love box out and like look through it and remind themselves and calm their nervous system. My partner loves me. They're here for me. They're fighting through this with me. They're going to work on conflict with me. Conflict is safe, right? Etc. That's just unique to that one. But, you know, there's little exercises that you can do for each attachment and security to regulate your body a little bit so you can show up differently.
Yeah, we keep talking about pausing and regulating and trying to own and understand where you are. There's a lot of good information. Can one person create enough change to get the relationship unstuck?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It takes one person to step out of that cycle. And with this book, we actually wrote it knowing that other partner may not even be willing to read the book or really do much. And so you can change how your partner reacts by just shifting your responses. It's incredibly hard. It sounds easy. It's easier said than done, but it's really, really hard, right?
It's so hard. Yep.
It is. It is hard, but it's possible, and it's going to require you to understand what's going on for your body, understand what's going on emotionally, understand what's going on relationally and through the history that you two have had, and then learning how do I step out of the cycle and make a move different so my partner doesn't become defensive and shut down, or so my partner doesn't, like, there are so many things you can control. And at the same time, you can't stop your partner from being unavailable, right? You can't try to get them to become available. And that's absolutely maybe the hardest is if we have a checked out partner, it's incredibly distressing. Conflict goes so much higher if we have somebody who's checked out and emotionally unavailable, and that will try to turn up the volume to be heard, or you just press pause and stay silent and it doesn't impact your partner. And at that point, it's going to be a bit about like, can I be okay where I'm at? And this is as far as it goes. And do I need to assess things differently?
Okay. So any final thoughts you want to share, and remind us of the title of your terrific new book and anything else you want my audience to know?
Our book is Help for High Conflict Couples. And I think the last thing that's just on my heart that I'd want people to remember is just to have hope. Like, we wrote this book so that people could have access to this research-based, really helpful theory at home. And you know, there's so much research on the effectiveness of emotionally focused therapy. Over 90% of couples who try it have success with it. You know, a lot of couples who come into therapy actually end up feeling better on the other side of therapy than they did feel even before the conflict began. So I just think the process of using emotionally focused therapy and reading this book is a very hopeful one. So I hope that people feel like they have tips and access to this at home, even if they can't afford therapy or maybe don't know where to get access to it. Hopefully they can get access to our book. And it is going to be available on audiobook coming in March too, which is so exciting.
All right. Thanks again to my listeners in Canada. So please keep following this podcast. I'm going to be bringing you different guests every week to give you the best information and the best help that you can get to improve your relationships. If you did enjoy this, please share it, and reviews do help.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.